Welcome to the Double D Do Business podcast by RLC with your hosts, Dave Evans and Debbie Halls-Evans, where they meet each week with guests and discover ways you can help yourself and others become best version businesses, teams, and people.
Hi, welcome to Double D Do Business. Debbie Halls-Evans here. Davey's going to be doing an interview with Keith Bailey from Articulated Intelligence, and they're going to be talking about all things stories and owning the stage. I'm going to let them take over and give you some really great conversation for you to listen to. I'm going to pop back and I'm going to give you some summary of what I took away from the podcast today.
We are recording, and I'm delighted to have a friend of RRC back with us today on Double D Do Business. I'm flying solo, so it's the Mr. Master, the man himself, Keith Bailey. So, Keith, good to have you back. We haven't seen you since Mallorca, is that right?
Since Mallorca, it's been about a year and a half.
Where has the time gone?
It's been a lot of time at home.
It has, isn't it? Yeah.
A lot of time spent at home. But yeah, you know, when you're a solopreneur, you put your head into your business, and it feels like sometimes it feels like you're standing still and the world is spinning around you.
Yeah.
And then you pull your head up, you're like, whoa, what's happened? And at the end, the result is you've built a business. And I think part of being a solopreneur as well is you learn how to adapt very quickly, because you have to in order to survive, right? Businesses, they have I think sometimes the Achilles heel of having this feeling of insulation, whereas a solopreneur, you feel you're exposed at all times. So yeah. when things happen, when things are always happening, you're constantly in a position of having to adapt. And I think that's where I've been since you and I saw each other last, is just in a constant state of adaptation.
It's been a strange period of time in the history of the world, I think, never mind our countries, because we could get lost in those two conversations alone. What has happened this year, as we've seen businesses around the world derailed, literally, if there was a buffer put in front of you, many businesses and industries were. The speaking arena, of which you're part of, is one of them, isn't it? Where stages closed down. So before we get into that, Keith, tell me about tell our listeners what it is you spend your time doing as a profession.
As a professional, I have dedicated my life and my time to helping business professionals prevent unintentional audience abuse. And unintentional audience abuse is when and I've seen this as of late, and it's really tearing me up inside, is people who are writing their speeches word for word in a virtual setting and then reading it to their audiences. That is abuse. People who put up PowerPoint presentations and then just read the PowerPoint presentation to you. Those are all forms of unintentional audience abuse. So what I do is I've created a methodology of writing for speaking that really empowers you to tell personal stories, which is one of the best ways you can connect with your audience, and then to tie those salient points to those stories. And facts and figures, they fade, and also content is no longer king. We can find all the content we want in the world on the internet. Stories can be really sticky. When we take a sticky story and we attach facts and figures to them, it becomes memorable. And that's really what I'm focused on, is helping people farm those personal experiences and stories, and then to be able to attach that meaning to it. It's been incredible to watch people have those aha moments.
Oh, I think we should join together for a minute and ask people to stop reading PowerPoint slides, right? Stop reading your scripts. It's not how to do this, Or if you are, get a broadcaster to do it in a studio who will broadcast it as you intended. Anyway, there's great advice there alone about putting together a sticky story with facts and making it memorable. That's worth writing down alone if you're listening to this in your car. In fact, just drive your car safely. It's probably a better idea. So,
come back and listen to it again.
So you're also involved in other things, aren't you? So before we talk about a stuck industry, you're involved in. Let me just pause there. when I discovered you did improv, for example, right? That was such a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. So which has changed, right? I haven't done improv since everything shut down. The theaters have shut down, and now the Bovine Metropolis Theater in Denver, Colorado is making the pivot, and they're starting to do it online, and it has a completely different feel to it. But again, a solo business owner that is put in a position of it's the Shawshank paradox, right? Is get busy living or get busy dying. So get busy building your business or get out of business is the choice that is before us now. And they have pivoted to where they now have improv that they're doing online. But the thing I love about improv is it teaches you to get out of your head and into your body, to be present in the moment, which when you take the stage, and I believe that all the world is a stage, the Shakespearean form of it is when you get out of your head, which is reading that script, and you get into your body, you come across as your authentic self to your audience. That's who they need to see. Is they need to see the person who they truly know, not this robotic reading sentences, because you're not there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's painful. It's painful to experience. And you also do ToastMasters, is that right?
Coming up on 8 years with Cherry Creek ToastMasters now. Yeah, and that whole thing is, there's a professional speaker by the name of Hillary Blair who just put it so eloquently. There is a direct correlation between a professional athlete and a professional businessman or person. And that as a professional athlete spends more time scrimmaging and reading the playbook than they ever do playing the actual game itself. And what Toastmaster offers you, if you have to take the stage and connect with an audience, is it is that playbook. It is that scrimmage, because you have to be a good active listener. You have to take the stage and present. And then you get all this feedback from your coaches, who are your peers that are also Toastmasters members, on what you can do to improve. So it's this constant state of scrimmaging and playbook, to where the time comes to take the stage. Well, you've been doing it all along anyway, and it just becomes that much easier.
Well, and again, 8 years says a lot about commitment too. So let's talk about this world where if your mode of earning a living was being a keynote speaker, being a professional presenter, the world definitely, like pubs and restaurants, shut down, didn't it? It was like, no, you can't do that anymore. The arts world, no, it stopped. So what did you do during that time to, keep your business, as you said, as a solopreneur, moving? How did you pivot, change, adapt? What have you been playing with?
Yeah, it was a crazy time. Within 14 days, I watched 90% of my contracts just disappear. And then I went out for a bike ride, and I crashed my bicycle.
Oh,
and I broke my shoulder. I have an axioclavicular break. It was one of those freak accidents where I hit a bump, my hands came off, I endoed. The only thing on the bike path is a steel park bench that is bolted to the ground. And I met that on the edge of my shoulder. And I'll tell you what, if you're gonna go to the emergency room, the pandemic is a time to do it, because there's nobody there. I was in and out in under 2 hours. But what happened is I'm left-handed, and I broke my left shoulder. And a really dear friend of mine, he's like, Keith, you are about to enter one of the most creative phases of your life, because you have to do everything with your other hand now. And he was 100% right. In this moment of personal injury, I decided to really compartmentalize and not share it with anybody, which is why it's a surprise to you. And what I ended up doing is, and this is something I learned long ago, far away, is that when you're in a state of loss and you don't know what to do, the best thing you can do is to reach out to other people and ask them, what can I do to help you? And that's what I started doing. I started having Zoom conversations, inviting this battle or a lunch liaise or a happy hour harangue, and playing a game that we call With One Word. And With One Word is a story generation game where we give a word, I give you a few triggers, you go back into your memory, into your experiences, and you pull forth experiences, and we share stories. And that's all that I did. Is every single day, 4 or 5 hours a day, I was on Zoom reaching out. And what came from that is a sense of purpose and meaning, and also understand that this is what people need. And I built my entire business around that. So now the pandemic is actually, in a sense, helping me, because the advent and really the usage of the virtual platform is allowing me to connect with people all over the world. I did a coaching with somebody in the Philippines, and then after that I had a conversation with someone in Australia, and on that same day I did a training that had people from Stockholm and from London, along with the East Coast, Midwest, and West Coast, all in the same day. There's no way we could have done this before the pandemic shut everything down. So the virtual stage is now really growing, but also the need to be able to come across and connect with your audience on the virtual stage is something that people need help with, right? There's a lot of unintentional audience abuse that is happening on the virtual platform. And I'm finding that that's been a great place to just help people.
I love that. And I have to ask you a bike question. You weren't riding your moots, were you?
Yes, I was.
And is the moot still with us?
The moot's still with us. That's what you get when you have a titanium bicycle. She does have a black eye still. There's a ding. It's on the bottom bracket on the down tube. It just has this. The bike came all the way up over my head, and the down tube hit the hand railing of the park bench itself. So yeah, it does have. But I've sent it in. They say it's good to go. She can take a licking. Keep on ticking.
It's funny because since I saw you last, and once we relocated from Mallorca to Scotland, my F10 didn't come with me. Yeah, it's still. I mean, there's an upside here, right? The F10 is in pristine condition, in Tommy's care. You know, Tommy from Sports Becky.
Yeah.
We've been looking after it. It's not been ridden. It's going to be the best F10 ever. At some point, I've got to go and fetch it, or Tommy actually is going to come to Scotland and bring it. So, I mean, there's a social experience waiting to happen, I think, in the circumstance. But I know if I did that to my F10, which is not made like a Mooters, I'm sure it would have just been the end of the F10. Yeah. So, and secondarily, most importantly, I sincerely hope your recovery goes as well as you want it to, because that's quite a savage hit.
I'll send you photos. I've fallen down many a times, but that was it. Those accidents you have where everything slows down. You're like, did I leave the oven on? That wasn't one of those. This thing was over. Like the moment it started, it was just boom, done. And the second I hit, my friend Lucas was with me. I sit up and I yell. I go, "This is very bad!" And I grab my arm and I put it back into my shoulder again, and then it just falls back out. I'm like, "This is very bad."
Yeah. It sounds like the Chris Froome crash. So, where yeah, totally. Well, I'll move on from it for those who are.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, glad you were able to use the time as an experience to your advantage, because the mindset choices we make come from the world within, and you then have to separate out in your recovery process the difference between when do I go within, and how do I, and on what terms do I engage with the world without? And it looks like you've done that pretty well. And so let's continue to talk about your business then. So what are the things you find yourself helping people with today? So we know this getting rid of this audience abuse. I absolutely love that. That's really good. Because any one of us could do it by mistake, hence the unintended.
Yeah,
so
we've all done it at some point.
Yeah. Hopefully less socially and definitely less professionally. So how have you found the desire for the work you do today? Because it sounds like it's been received well. So if somebody's listening to this going, do you know what, I probably need help with this exact problem, what should they be talking to you about? And also tell me about how they get in touch with you, Keith.
Yeah. You can find me via my website, articulatedintelligence.com. Also via my LinkedIn page. I'm the only Keith MJ Bailey that is out there. But the biggest thing that I get is people like, I don't have any great stories. Nothing exciting has ever happened to me. I never summited Mount Everest. I've never done a Song Coles challenge. I haven't done anything massive in my life. What's interesting about that is people don't necessarily relate to that. People don't relate to having climbed Mount Everest. They don't know what it's like. And what people relate to is what's most common. What is most common is most universal. It's the simple life experiences that we've had that people can relate to, right? Having gone to school, having been challenged at school, having owned a car, having lived a life. And what we do is show you how to take the simple things that happen in life and to be able to position it as something of interest and something as a learning, right? A story is about change over time. I used to believe this, these things happened to me, and now I believe this. For case in point, a story that I share quite often was when I got my first desk job, I was selling cycling apparel, which is akin to selling male lingerie. And after a week of smiling and dialing, I hadn't made a single sale. And my boss, Dave Edwards, came to me and he's like, Keith, he's like, you're doing great. You're making lots of calls. I'm like, yeah, man, it's a numbers game. He's like, it is, but you're calling and you're promoting the company, and people don't buy from companies. They buy from people that they like. So what I want you to do is I want you to call from here on out and sell them nothing but a conversation. You're in the cycling apparel business. They're in the cycling business. Just talk about biking. Talk about what's most common. And for me, that changed everything, right? I started playing the long game. I started having a mindset of, you may not be my customer today, but when we get to know each other, there's a good possibility you'll be my customer tomorrow.
And actually, let's pause there for 10 seconds. If you're running a business in these conditions we've been talking about, that's a good mindset alone. Some of the worst and best salespeople, which means they can be both of that character at any given time.
Yep.
Say, you're going to buy off me one day.
Yeah.
And it's just a good mentality. So what happened next?
But so that story unto itself is in business, you instantly related with it, right? That's a really good mindset. Yes, it's a story that I have curated and pulled forth. It's a story that I share, and when sharing is such a simple story with that meaning behind it, right? I'm playing the long game. You might have been my customer today, but my customer tomorrow. Is in its simplicity also gives my value set that I'm here to build a relationship with you, not just to sell you something. I don't want a transactional business. I want to have a relationship. And so what we do is we basically go back and explore people's pasts and their stories, the things that really make them who they are, and we're able to take those stories then and attach those pieces of meaning to them. Because when you share something as personal as that, there's a connection that happens between you and your audience, right? And we talk about audience, and this is an audience, the listeners are an audience, but you have that connection and also an elevation of trust. And that is the biggest thing in business, is people buy from people that they like, hence people that they trust.
Yeah.
And the best way we can build that trust is through the sharing of personal experiences.
And I have to tell you though, you did say that you haven't done the Everest, you haven't done that, you haven't done this. But I must tell you, you have done one thing, which is rather interesting. I cannot ride Calobra the same. Sa Calobra, Mallorca, if you're listening, one of the top 10 mountain climbs in the world. Did you know that? On most cycling magazines. And anyway, whether you're riding it for real, and I recommend it, whether you're riding it on full gas, where I think full gas has got the single best video footage of climbing Sa Calobra. There's a point as you get up it. I don't quite remember when it was in terms of kilometers, but I know the exact bend when you go from the lower mountain undulating and you go on the top third.
Yeah.
There was a rock. Do you recall it? Where you were doing your burpees, right? And you can remind people why you were doing your burpee challenge in a minute. But I even virtually, this is the thing, right? I'll ride Calobra on full gas on that equipment I was sharing with you earlier on the Wahoo stuff. And it'll be on the TV, and I'll be riding along, and I'll just see you in that corner going, that's where Keith was, God damn it, right? Doing your super burpees that day. How did that challenge play out while I'm talking about it? Because, I mean, who in their right mind does burpees halfway up a coal climb?
So for the listeners, nobody likes doing burpees.
Yeah.
Yet burpees are life, because burpees are in everything that we do. When we fall down, we have to get ourselves back up again. And when you get yourself back up again, you might as well celebrate. And that's what a burpee is. A burpee is life. So what I decided to do was to do the aggregated number of days of the year in burpees every single day, which
Yep.
means day one, I do one, day two, I do two. And I would vary how I did my burpees. The location, San Calabria, it was March something. I think I was up to, I think it was like a 95 or 96 burpees that day. And it was incredible because, and this is something that a martial arts instructor shared, really embedded in my mind, is there's a finite amount of movements, but there's an infinite number of combinations, right? In business, that applies as well. There's an infinite amount of ways that we can do business together, but business is still business. The way that challenge ended up working out is I ended up with a pinched nerve, not because of burpees, but because of burpees. I was doing one where I was squatting, rolling, pressing into a handstand, and then doing a burpee. And I happened to have my head turned funny, and I got a little bit of a crick in the neck that then ended up exacerbating. I made it to day 177.
That's some effort, though, isn't it?
It was great. I will finish it at some point, but the curve is exponential as well, because it's like flat at the bottom, then it just goes up. And I forget the total number of burpees I would have completed if I'd finished the whole thing. But I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I need to finish it at some point.
But again, it was just that moment of, you come up around that corner on Calabria, you're running at 8-9%. And, we all, if I remember, I overate at the bottom in the cafe. And we're working that out as you're coming back up, and they were doing your burpees. So anyway, so you left the mark is the point. And for anyone listening, I must ask for their instant forgiveness, because I'm going to say something that's only relevant to Keith. And here it goes. He Larson. Anyway,
Larson.
Such a lot of fun on that experience of having friends in Mallorca from America come and visit. It was such a good laugh. And we were all very lucky to be able to do that stuff then. So,
and to come back as well to what you're speaking to is the building of relationships. That's what business is all about. And whether you're taking the boardroom stage or the elevator stage or the keynote stage, we need to build relationships as quickly as we possibly can, and relationships equal trust, equal rapport as quickly as we can with our audience. The easiest way we can do that is through the sharing of a story. Now, here's a great thing about stories. Whatever was bad for you is great for the story. And it also shows your audience that you are human, right? The time that I failed doing this, I learned these things, right? And we all have a life of failings. That's how we end up getting better, as we learn from those experiences. So I think that's a huge one as well, is to know that in order for the audience to endear themselves, to see you not as superhuman, is to share them of a failing that you had. Right?
Yeah.
Brooke Chestnut, good friend of ours,
yeah.
right? Mountaineer, the man's in his 60s. He is gonna go back to Everest and finish it. He had not a failing, but he ended up having an injury where he had to leave Everest. And he shares that very fallible moment on stage. It's a very emotional, personal moment on stage. And every time he does, like, the audience is just with him. And they trust him.
Yeah, because of the commitment it demonstrates and all those. You should listen to Brooke talk about that himself. But I totally agree with you. It's that power of that personal failure, relatable failure in the story. And I think, coming back to your moment where you talked about nothing's really happened to you and how you navigate that and helping others to discover what's happened to them. One of the things I think Brooke does is he brings what many people will see as the impossible, that they'll never get to do, to their front room, to the seat they're sat in, to that moment of going, well, I wonder what I would have done, how I would have coped. Just deleting the fact. It doesn't matter whether you would have or what you would have done. And you make the fact that you may never, ever, ever, ever do it, make it relatable in that moment in time. And you get to feel a bit of it. And I think there's magic in that. Even your crash experience, as awful as that was we can all imagine having a crash of sort or a moment, car, bus, truck, lorry, train, hopefully none of those things, where you've been in a situation where you knew that the consequence was going to be bad instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what it was, it's what you do next that matters. And we're coming up towards the end in a minute. So I want to ask you to just summarize about the difference your business makes, and if there was a single thought you want anyone listening to this to remember. And there's plenty to choose from. So
there's so much. So when we get into stories, and people are complicated, right? And back to Brooke, the story's not about Everest when you listen to Brooke, right? It's about adapting to change and controlling things you have no control over. Yeah. And that's a really powerful component of that. And for the audiences and for the people that I work with, the permission that I give them is the permission to share something of themselves without feeling that they're bragging or they're being boisterous, because that's not what it's about. I'm not up here, bragging like I'm such a great salesperson because I make phone calls and work on relationships. That's not what that story is about. Right? And you have so many of them as well. The trainings that we've done together, you speak to the lessons that you learn, and those are the lessons that we need to share with our audiences. And you can't share those through facts and figures. If people want facts and figures, they'll go to the internet. The reason you're on that stage, whichever stage it may be, the reason you're on that stage is because you've been asked to be there.
Yeah.
And you belong there. That's a huge part of it, is you belong on that stage. And the only thing you have to do is to give the audience what they deserve, which is a piece of you. Because the audience is very empathetic, because they see themselves on that stage, and all they want for you to do is to succeed and to win, because they themselves see themselves up there and not doing what you're about to do. So give a bit of yourself, give a little bit of a personal story, and you'll be forever thanked and you'll be memorable.
I love it. So Keith, thank you. As we hand back to Debbie, who's going to top and tail this interview, if I didn't say that at the start, who couldn't be with us today, to put her spin on what we've both talked about. Yeah. Articulated intelligence is there to help you unlock your story. And let's remember, get rid of those unintentional abuse of audiences. And you've been listening to WD Do Business. I'll pass this back to Debbie to tell you what she thinks about what we've been speaking about.
So I'm back. Great to listen to Dave and Keith talking a lot. And that cycling got in there as well, didn't it? But there was 3 really key summary points that I took away from this. And if we go right back to the beginning, that's stop reading your slides. Get better at bullets, or just put pictures, or don't even have a presentation. As Keith calls it, unintentional audience abuse. They're pretty strong words, yet they're powerful, because if somebody wants to be engaged and connected to you, they can read the notes themselves. So talk to people, and remember, stop reading slides. The second bit that I took out was make it personal. And that ability to make your story matter and then link it to relevant stats or facts or points that you want your audience to remember. And if I'm remembering correctly, they called it a sticky story. So, and I think one of the another examples, which was great, was consider taking up improv. You can then do it online as well. And as Keith said, this is about becoming your authentic self, because you're not reading a script. It's very natural. It's you. And also that ability to remember your story and make it sticky to connect to the points you want. And the final thing that I got from it, and there's lots in there as well, is that whole link of sales is difficult. Sales, I can't do this, I can't do that. And the example that Keith gave in his early sales career is relationships and sales particularly come from great conversations. The conversation comes first, the relationship comes second, and sales become third. And I think if we get better at doing that, and we just don't fire into somebody and say bye, 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 bye. And this to me is really important, because it's one of the things that I think I really struggle with around sales is I want that conversation first. I want to know about you. I want to know about what you do. I want to connect with you. So I really like that point as well. So every interaction is building a relationship first, and the conversation. But a great interview. Really glad to hear Keith again. And I hope he's fighting fit and recovering from his shoulder. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. All the links to access Keith at Articulate Intelligence are in the podcast. And also you can connect to him directly via the link as well on LinkedIn.
You've been listening to the Double D Do Business podcast, brought to you by RLC and sponsored by CoachPad, the coaching tool built for you by coaches for coaches. If you would like any assistance or help for what you've heard today, please feel free to get in touch with us at info@rlc-global.com. That's info@rlc-global.com. And we would be delighted to hear from you. Wishing you every success with your learning.